Okay, today I am in another prison, and guess which room this one was for? Yep, this was for the suicidal, the psychotic, and the ones who were a bit drugged up. And we're in a, being told we've got like realish prison guards. We've been doing a lot of random things. And I apologise if some of this is rude, some of the graffiti. It is all original and nothing is closed off. So that was a general cell. You can have up to 12 people in there. This is for the people who are at risk of being in prison. The paedophiles, the ex-police force and things. This is the exercise yard for them. Yeah, nothing. That's the exercise yard for everyone else. Again, you can have up to 12 people in here. And these toilets are only flushed from the outside. So,
inmates residing in cells 9, 14. Men's exercise yard to the archway and the middle block.
So this one, no benches. There's a hall in here. You might be able to guess what this one's for. I'll tell you in 3, 2, 1. This one was for the drunks. You know, they fly a mess, they need something which could clean easily. So they had a toilet there, and they had a drain there. And that's all the drunks got. Yeah, it can get quite messy. This is the Love Shack. This is what me and 12 other men were just incarcerated in. The lights go off at 9 PM and they don't come on again until 7 AM. Not a lot of space. Also, sleeping on this floor is very cold. In the middle of winter, it's cold, and in the middle of the summer, like now, it's 34 degrees outside. It's about 10 in here. And that's the showers. And that's it. And this is our prison guard, Sergeant. This is what we've got to call him, Sergeant. The most famous prisoner to stay in Melbourne prison was called Ned Kelly, or Edward Kelly. He's been compared to as a olden day terrorist. He was basically a bush outlaw, like a bit like Robin Hood in that sense. He bush, he was in the bush, and yeah, he wore armour and made numerous. This isn't him, by the way. This is Mick Jagger's film about him. But he wore armour, and he basically wanted to overthrow the government, become an anarchist, but he also had a bomb, conducted bombings, and threatened police officials and government, which makes him apparently a terrorist. So, most famous one, and apparently he's very famous, and there's a big thing, because obviously this is the old one. There are other penal centres before, and he was in the first. And when he was buried, the prison was moved they tried to get his body, because he was very famous. They dug up his grave and tried to put him in a new place, but people stole bones and things, and his skeleton was basically stolen, and people basically got very angry. It was like, "No, you need to put the bones back." So people eventually put the bones back, and someone claimed to be his skull. But a more recent analysis of the skull has basically said that it's not his. And they know this by analysing data from his great nephew and doing things like this, and yeah, it's not his skull. So where is it? And that's why people still love Ned Kelly. This is a cat of nine tails, if you didn't realise already. Interesting thing from the Fremantle prison, which was a while back, I know, but just say it anyway, is that the punishment there, the maximum was 100 lashes, and the doctor was always present, and if he decided it was too he couldn't do all 100 lashes in one go, so he got something like 25, let's say, and he said, no, he's bleeding, he'll die if you carry on. They take him off the rack, put him in hospital, let him heal up, and then unfortunately, because they had to carry out the sentence, he'd get out of prison out of prison hospital, and go straight back on the rack to carry out the rest of his sentence. And sometimes with 100 lashes, this would take 6 or 7 times, because imagine that. Not nice. These are death masks. They poured onto the unfortunate, for example here, of William Walker. When he died, they put wax. Well, they normally sort of shaved him first, and then they poured wax on his head and took a mould, basically, in which they'd then pour plaster and things in to later. So yeah. So I am now in the government house of I thought he was serving me then. Oh, so there we go. Look, we're on a nice mosaic. Where no council is the people, full but in the multitude of councillors there is safety. Dun dun dun. Oh, there's also a fan here, so I'm just going to stand in front of there. There you go, I'll block you from the wind. And you can have a look at the premiers of Victoria up till now. The current one is this man. So there you go.
You might just want to do a bit of a photo shoot, so don't be shy about that. Just while you're doing that, I'll give you a very brief explanation about how our system of government works, particularly for us overseas visitors. Here in Victoria, and in all of the Australian parliaments, the 6 state parliaments and the federal parliament in Canberra, take your photos, it's quite okay. By and large, we follow the British Westminster system. We've got 2 parliamentary chambers. This room here is our lower house. We call this room the Legislative Assembly. Our upper house, where we'll go to a little bit later on, we call the Legislative Council. Very similar in lots of ways to the mother of all parliaments. We've been using our system here, or the Westminster system, pretty much for the last 160 plus years. The British Parliament's been going roughly about 300 years longer than that. Their 2 chambers, they call the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Basically, the only difference between us in the mother-in-law parliaments is that we have elections in both of our chambers. So if you want to, you can stand for election to this room, or if you want to, you can stand for election to the upper house, the Legislative Council. And that's a bit different from the British system where, as I say, people get elected to the House of Commons, but they get appointed to the seat in the House of Lords. And historically, in the House of Lords, you'd be appointed to the seat on the basis of a person's, well, their status in society, their land holdings, if they're big businessmen, members of the upper classes, connected to royalty, all those different sorts of things might see them appointed to a seat in the House of Lords. When we started off, a bit over 160 years ago, we said we're not going to do that. We said we'll have elections in our upper house, which I guess for 160 years ago was a fairly drastic sort of a thing to do. But really, for the first 100 years or so, it wasn't quite that drastic because even though we had elections to our upper house, we made sure that not everybody could stand for election to our upper house. We had a certain selection criteria. So 100 odd years ago, you'd say, I want to join the, I want to stand for election to the Legislative Council. Yes, of course you can do that. But before you do, you need to tell us you have lots of money, lots of land, or you're a member of the upper classes, are connected to royalty, pretty much the same sort of criteria as the House of Lords. If you could answer yes to those questions, that made you eligible, which meant, of course, that only a very small percentage of the Victorians of the day were eligible. We didn't change those rules here as far as eligibility until the early part of the 1950s. Since then, in either of the two chambers, it really doesn't matter what your background is, rich or poor, humble or famous, as long as you're an Australian citizen and of course a resident Victorian, that's as much as we ask. And if you can get the votes in either of the two chambers, you can go and become together. Here in Melbourne, do you have a question? In 1901, the 6 states got together here in Melbourne in the Exhibition Building, which is about a kilometre from here. Federated and formed, I guess you might describe it as an umbrella parliament, uniting all of those 6 states a bit more formally. That all took place on the 9th of May 1901. So the Federal Australian Parliament was created then. They were only about a kilometre from here, as I said before. The only thing they didn't have was the Australian Parliament House. And the decision to build a federal parliament in Canberra didn't happen until about 1913. But then it took about another 13 years on top of that. So for 26 years, the Australian Parliament needed to find somewhere to have their formal sittings. So very graciously, the Victorian Parliament said, you can come and sit in this. A good demonstration, I guess you might say. If you're going to embark on a building and decoration program, you probably need to have a gold rush. So again, just like in the lower house chamber, that's all 23 carat gold leaf. We really don't know how much all the gold leaf in here is worth. Most people seem to think about $5 or $6 million. So this room, the library, the lower house, the vestibule, some of the meeting rooms, etc. Probably throughout the whole building, some people, most people think it's probably somewhere around about $15 million worth of gold leaf. But of course, we really don't know. As I say, we weren't here 160 years ago and it was being put up. So it could be any amount, I guess. As I said, the gold rush lasted for the better part of 40 years, so I guess you work out $15 million out of billions of dollars. I think in the first 5 years of the gold rush, the figure quoted is, on today's dollar values, about $5 billion worth of gold was excavated. So what's a few million here